NuVoodoo Live.
Well, the three of us cut our teeth in the radio business, worked together for about 20 years running radio stations. The last 10, though, here at NuVoodoo, we've developed expertise both to help radio stations with new and innovative marketing solutions and research products. And of course, in the last 5-6 years or so, we've expanded to the point where now our non-radio business is probably a little bigger than our radio business. And through that expertise, though, I think we've maintained our robust knowledge of the audio entertainment space. And today, we're going to share with you some of the latest results as it applies to the three major audio entertainment verticals: podcasting, streaming music, and our AM/FM radio. PJ is the head of marketing for NuVoodoo, and Lee runs our research department and oversees our perceptual studies. And he completes studies for PJ and I twice every year. And what we're going to do today is share a little bit of insight into the audio media space. For those of you who use audio media as part of your marketing and advertising, whether you're in or out of the audio media industries, this will be insightful to you because you really get to see how to maximize efficient reach and frequency. And for those of you in audio media, we've got something that will help you work around a couple of problems that you'll have where certain categories of audio media restrict competition, making it tough for you to advertise there, but we've got some solutions for you. So Lee, why don't we set the stage with the audio entertainment landscape first? Just give us a sort of an overview where things are in the first quarter here in 2023.
Well, we're at this intersection where technology has been driving us in one direction, and then frankly, the pandemic changed things around when so many people were deployed from work from home situations. So now that we're getting back to a more normal way of life where most people who are working out of home, we've got a remaining shred that's sort of distributed around the country who are still working mostly or exclusively from home. But most folks who work are back to work, working outside home. And so that lines up to that broadcast radio thing where you see that 54% say that they regularly use broadcast radio when they're in a car or truck, they're outside their home. Compare that to podcasting or DSPs, which are far more, and DSP, digital streaming provider. So that is described to respondents. They're thinking of Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Pandora, and what have you. And that and podcasting are far more home-based kind of centric. But all of these are sort of in flux now in 2023.
So for the first time, we've actually taken a look at these audio verticals, not only in terms of listening location, but also in terms of time of day. And I think this is kind of useful. Now, this overall would be everybody in our study. And this most recent study was well over 5,000 respondents, 14 to 54 nationwide. So we're looking at everybody, whether they consume audio media or not, Lee. But before we distill things down into the shares of just the big three, maybe a quick look at this slide.
Well, sure. And some people don't listen to audio media. And this, think of it situationally. So, from top to bottom, it's mornings at home, morning on a commute, perhaps in car, public transit, workday outside your home, at work, maybe workday from home, which could include people who are actually deployed to work from home or people who are doing something around the house. They're not part of the employed pool, but they're not part of the workforce, but they've still got things to do. So there are people who will have some kind of audio media playing while they do housework or other chores. A late afternoon commute, evenings at home, weekends at home. And we separated that from weekends out and about in a car on public transit. And so you see how the don't listen in that situation percentages fluctuate up and down. And if we factor that out and factor out the other possible audio choices and just limit it to those three major food groups, if you will, podcasting, DSP, and broadcast radio, you see that broadcast radio is at its best, if you will, when folks are in their cars or outside their homes in the morning or the late afternoon or on weekends.
And I was really kind of surprised by radio holding its own, especially, it's become an in-car medium very clearly. And in the two drive times, it holds its own and it in some cases dominates. But so PJ, it kind of makes sense that you've gotten into the world of digital outdoor I suppose it's good for radio clients who want to advertise themselves, but really anybody who's using radio as a foundational in-car buy, a digital out of home kind of helps complement that.
Yeah, the compliment I think is the right word there. As we saw, heavy users of radio in particular, they got back to work faster, if you will, as everybody went from getting being at home to getting back to the office, sort of post COVID, as we got into sort of the endemic phase of that. We started to see that more, and so compliments like digital outdoor, et cetera, being able to get at them once they are in the office, et cetera, like we're able to package things in a way that really focused on the fact that they are in that car for that particular period of time, and pretty glued to the radio in most cases.
So if you're an audio entertainment brand, there's going to be some whoops, a little trouble here with this one. There we go. It worked in rehearsal. So this is sort of a look at audio apps. And what we mean by that is probably more music than not, but all of these apps also give you access to podcasts. So this is for audio entertainment brands looking to expand audience or introduce themselves. This will give you kind of an idea of what mix of audio choices might be a great way to get the word out. And if you're a buyer of audio, it's always about efficient reach with lots of frequency. So you want to know where the heavy consumers are listening the most frequently. And this crosstab really kind of gives you those answers.
Right. And these three crosstabs are broadcast radio, FM, AM heavies. That's 10 hours a week or more. That's a lot of time spent listening. DSP heavies, same threshold, 10 hours a week. Yeah. And the podcast heavies. So it's not really surprising that among the DSP heavies, the number one platform that they're using often or all the time is Spotify. We've done our very best to get respondents to remember the distinction between YouTube itself and the separate app that is YouTube Music. But let's be honest, they do the best they can, but it's a 20-minute interview. It goes pretty quickly, and I'm sure there's some conflation of one platform or the other. But you can clearly see where the big hitters are for each of those three groups: podcast heavies, DSP heavies, and broadcast radio heavies.
Now, it's really hard to buy around Spotify and Pandora. I mean, they command a significant share of the heavy users, PJ. But and I know we have some restrictions for certain categories of our clients. Maybe speak to that a little bit, and then maybe tease a little bit about some of the new and exciting stuff we've learned about YouTube here in the last few months.
Yeah, so there are some restricted categories, things like alcohol, depending on your demo and who you're going for and that kind of thing. But the big one that kind of nails radio is Spotify and Pandora in particular do not allow for anything they perceive as a competitor to advertise on there. So if you're trying to drive listening, trying to drive people to the radio station at particular times, whether you're doing contesting or commercial-free hours or whatever that looks like, unfortunately, those particular platforms, SiriusXM would kind of fall into that category since they're packaged up with Pandora. It becomes difficult there. If you're not a radio client, then it's pretty much wide open there. I will say, though, that to the point you were suggesting, for radio clients, there is a new YouTube offering that has come out of beta that is now an option, which we're going to talk about here in just a second, that will give you sort of not an end around, but an alternative that is very similar and still has a pretty significant share of listening, enough to certainly justify packaging it up with some of the other products that we've got.
I have to say I was a little surprised about YouTube Music showing up as high as it did, but I probably shouldn't have been, because for years, really, YouTube has been the dominant sort of these walled garden platforms that we use to help brands both in and out of the audio media space advertise themselves and grow audience. And I can see here that YouTube, once again, against podcast, DSP, and AM/FM users, Lee, it commands the daily use of really just about everybody, a good 3/4 of the heavies.
Right. And even that's a platform that I think is in a little bit of flux as people start finding different ways to use YouTube. It's increasingly a companion on people's big flat screen in their den or family room, but they're using it on a smartphone as well. And it's a huge number. You also get from this the tremendous depth of those podcast heavies where these are really leaned in people. They're consuming a spoken word product. They are by definition kind of info junkies. So even there toward the bottom of that ranking, you've got Truth Social at 40% daily reach among that population of people who are using podcasts at least 10 hours a week.
PJ, I was surprised to learn about YouTube's podcast platform. They sort of introduced that really kind of secretly. And I was even more surprised to learn just to what extent there's an appetite to watch podcasts on YouTube.
There are a lot of podcasts that are sort of shifting into the video side of things. Obviously, when podcasting first came out, there were very few that did that. It was almost all audio, but they've really moved into that. And I think it's for a number of reasons. One, it's just more engaging. I think the engagement level just gets higher when you add the visual element to it. I also think that the number of ways that you can promote a podcast organically increases significantly, because you can take clips of that and all of a sudden now your TikTok channel is just a clip from what would be a normal hour-long podcast. You can get a 90-second clip in there and have it really have impact and use it on TikTok or Instagram Reels, Facebook, etc. So a lot of good options there from a content production standpoint for sure.
And boy, while we're on the subject of TikTok, let's get into what we call compulsive use. Lee, first maybe want to describe what we mean by that, and then I'm going to go, oh my God, look at TikTok's compulsive use numbers.
Sure, because we're setting the threshold here at least 4 times a day. That's really over the top for most people. 4 times a day, checking in, what's going on, refreshing my feed, what's going on with my friends, is there new content I should see? I'm just trying to defeat boredom some of the time. And you can see particularly among the broadcast radio heavies, the podcast radio heavy, or the podcast heavies, it does play to what we think of as kind of our foundational 4. We should get PJ to speak to what that is. But then when you get to kind of the younger audience profile of the DSP heavies, there you see TikTok climb into the threshold where it's rivaling the top ranked apps there of Google and YouTube.
Yeah, does TikTok threaten the foundational 4? It seems to me that it's kind of tied with Instagram, PJ. I guess you maybe better describe what we mean by foundational 4, because it's been our go-to tactic for, oh God, more than half a decade. And it just keeps holding up. It's just a great way to saturate a demo or an industry category when you're trying to really get the word out fast about a product.
Yeah, so just to quickly define it, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but the top 4 channels that we have seen over the course of what feels like forever, Facebook, Instagram, Google, and YouTube make up what we consider to be the foundational 4. It is foundational regardless of the kind of client that a person happens to be or a business happens to be. Lee and I joked on a recent webinar, we keep wondering every time we do these, is this going to be the one where Facebook dies? Because there's always that threat looming that they're going to go away, and they just don't. They keep adding things in an effort to drive engagement, and so far have done a pretty good job of that. TikTok certainly is a threat to them, though, as noted by the fact that they are essentially copying their style of content delivery through algorithmically based, delivery of content that's outside of your friends and people that you follow and so forth in an effort to keep you engaged. And so TikTok is certainly something that is worth considering, particularly if you target younger, so that Gen Z part of the audience certainly is accessible through TikTok. It still has issues from a targeting standpoint. You can't get particularly narrow from a geography standpoint, just as an example, and some of their interest and behavior stuff's not very specific, but it is certainly something to talk about, including depending on who your audience is.
And if you're a journalist and you want Xi Jinping, easy for me to say, to learn where your whereabouts are, this is probably the vehicle for you. And I guess I kind of wonder whether or not this will be the quarter that TikTok comes to die through no fault of its own in terms of its ability to attract users. But I think there's a hearing going on in Congress as we're recording this.
It may be, yeah. Whether or not the CEO of ByteDance gets talked into spinning it off into its own company, or they just decide. I saw in the news earlier this week that Meta has successfully lobbied so that if they take executive action to ban a social media product that they have no recourse legally. I don't know the details, and I'm not an attorney, but it feels very much like Meta is very much on the offensive as it relates to trying to get this app banned, and I get it. I mean, it's encroaching on their territory pretty heavily. So, but we'll see. Right now, I mean, we just focus on the things that exist in front of us, and so until TikTok goes away and or gets banned, we're going to have to take it seriously, I think.
So our staff of media buyers specializes in both logging into walled gardens like Facebook and YouTube, for example, and executing campaigns. But we also use and have been using for years programmatic media, where we buy exchange traded media. And we've done that for traditional digital advertising for a long time. But what has emerged in the last few years is something which basically emulates that for the audio media space. And that would be the programmatic audio, PJ. Whoops, having a little trouble with my slides today.
Yeah, you sort of alluded to it, much like we do display and video in terms of buying it programmatically, there's a lot of similar options there. It allows us to get into a bunch of different places through a network as opposed to trying to go buy each site individually. The other advantage that we've got to is we can put together, much like with display and video, private marketplace deals. So if you are a very niche product or have a niche audience, then we can piece together some combinations of things that are very specific to who you're going after and what you're going after. That will it's a little bit more expensive to do that, but you're not blowing money on potential impressions that aren't necessarily going to matter as much to your brand. So it gives us a really good opportunity to be in all these places, but in some very specific ways.
If you can drive an audience to an assistive technology program like we did the last couple of years out on the West Coast, we can pretty much find an audience for everything. There's
right.
No question. Now let's get to the kind of the main thing that I think our radio clients will be really interested in. That has to do with the fact that, yes, it is hard to buy around. It is hard to buy around Pandora and Spotify, and you are not able to execute any sort of TSL-based advertising message on YouTube. And if you're a podcast advertiser and you're interested in extending your reach, and especially if you want to reach this new segment of more men than women that are watching podcasts, YouTube has introduced a new audio ad unit. PJ, maybe a little bit more from you.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit earlier that they sort of soft launched their podcast section, which if you go to youtube.com/podcast, they've got a whole curated area of exactly that, and it's pretty great. And so so as that starts to get adopted, which right now, obviously most people don't know it exists, so there's not, it does not command a ton of usage at this point, but from an audio only standpoint, it does not command a whole lot. But when you factor in the watch portion of it, they are clearly leaders of that. I mean, which is no shock, because if you think, hey, you know what, there's a video that I know exists out there and I want to go see where it is. I mean, the platform people are going to default to most is going to be YouTube. And so that's going to include all this and give us a chance to avoid the restrictions that we see on some of these other platforms, because YouTube audio does not have the same kinds of restrictions for what they would potentially deem to be competitors. So radio stations that are trying to drive listening, I definitely would not do this as a standalone tactic. I think that it is a part of a mix of things. We talked about the foundational four and kind of that packaging. We have the ability to target YouTube contextually on the video side of things. So there are a lot of ways that we can factor this in and include it that have a great opportunity to be effective.
So guys, let's wrap things up. We're very flat here at NuVoodoo. It's easy to get in touch with us. PJ, what's the best way if somebody's interested in learning more from you about marketing?
Well, you can get to all of us at tellmemore@nuvoodoo.com, but I'm just PJ at nuvoodoo.com. So that's an easy way to get a hold of me. And then whether it's me or somebody else that is around me, certainly once you get to one of us, as you said, you get to all of us. So it's pretty easy for me.
And Lee, you do these studies for us internally a couple times a year, but most of your day is spent executing perceptual studies for brands in and outside of audio media. Best way to reach you?
It's my first name, unusual spelling it might be, but it's Leigh at NuVoodoo.com.
And since the internet is trying to audition us for a remake of the Jay Giles freeze frame video, I think we'll end things here. Thanks so much for watching us today.
NuVoodoo helps brands reach consumers with audio advertising, no matter where they are. Take advantage of our private marketplace deals and gain access to premium content so you stop wasting impressions. Leverage our data partner relationships to target just the right consumers on audio brands they're passionate about. Your message gets through whether listeners are staring at a screen or staring off into space. Let NuVoodoo help you make programmatic audio part of your next omni-channel marketing campaign or as a standalone strategy for your brand. We're here to help. Contact us at tellmemore@nuvoodoo.com.